welcome to Boulevard's Big Three, where we break down this week's sermon with questions from you, me, and my son Knox. This is week 4 of our series, Together, Relationships, Unity, and the Family of God, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, if you have any questions about the sermon, you can scan the QR code on the screen. But all right, Kelvin, my job is to summarize your sermon.
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to do that. So obviously, we talked about love. That was the main thing. We looked at 1 Corinthians 13.
That's
that was like the main thing we're talking about. Some key points about that that I love to point out. You talked a lot about letting love rule and letting that be the actions that we have throughout our day and throughout our relationships, and I love that. I always think that love is a fantastic and a very interesting thing to talk about when you talk about virtues and you talk about ways in which we live out for Christ. Love has always stood out as something that's very interesting to me. So you went in a lot on that and how we can have love be our foundation. I know you're going to talk about that in a little bit, but yeah. Was that good?
That was a great summary.
Okay.
A+.
We got to keep him around.
I was trying not to step on your
Thank you.
your
So
big
smart.
three.
Yeah.
So smart.
Yeah.
That's right.
But yeah. All right. Well, we can dive into those big three. So, Mom, what do you have this week?
Well, I think this was so good. And, you know, kind of like Knox was saying, love is something we throw that word around all the time.
Yes.
But it really is the foundation. It's so important. One of the things you said was love must be the foundation of all we say and think and do. Woo, that's a tall order.
Yeah.
And you said we should ask ourselves first, is there love behind this? Which I think is a great it's a great filter to put things through for us, but also it's a good way to talk to our kids, don't you think?
Yeah. You know, if it is the foundation of all we say and think and do, it slows us down, okay? So I have to start questioning, you know, before I do something. You know, a lot of times we ask the question after we do it. Man, you know, did I come across the right way? You know, did that? You know, where'd that come from? Or why did I say that? But if the question on the front end is, okay, is love really behind this? In any criticisms that we might have, because criticisms are a part of life. You know, we need to be instructed. We need correction. But is it coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a different place? Is it coming from a selfish place? Is it coming from an arrogant place, a rude place, an unkind place? I think that, you know, as the family of God, as disciples of Jesus, we have to challenge ourselves to live that out with integrity, with strength, to really, really do it. Not necessarily always to feel it, but it's an action. So it's more action than it is emotion, and I think that we just have to carry it out through our lives by questioning what we say, what we think, and what we do.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so good. I remember one time years and years ago hearing this woman. She said she told a bunch of teen girls to think of the boy that they like or the boy they're dating or whatever, and to see if they can put his name in there. You know, Knox is patient. Knox is kind.
Yeah.
You know, can you? And if you can, that's a good sign. If you can't, that's not a good sign.
Right. And I've also heard that that's a good mirror for us. We put our own names there.
Put Abby in there.
You know, am I these things? Am I coming across like this? And you might be able to gather some folks around you, like your family, and say, hey, here's 1 Corinthians 13. How do I, in your opinion, how do I measure up to that?
And then if you get mad that they say no and you keep record of that wrong, then you got that one
You're
wrong.
keeping score. That's exactly right. You need to go back to step 1.
That's right. Start over.
Yeah.
The second thing I wrote down, you said love keeps on going. You said it shows kindness in response to someone else's evil. And I have a feeling that someone heard that today who's been really hurt.
Yeah.
And they started a sentence that said, but what about?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, Paul doesn't say it's easy. He just says it, you know. Yeah, there are different nuances. There are different areas that might really, really be difficult for all of us. But we are freer when we get to the point where we can say, I'm no longer keeping score. It doesn't mean that I forgot what they did. It's that I'm no longer allowing what they did to affect my relationship with them or to even affect my life anymore. At some point, I think everyone has to come to that, though we might not all come to that in the same amount of time. Yeah.
Is there a difference between that and like reconciliation, or is that the same thing in your mind?
Well, I think reconciliation, it might be further down the road. You know, I might have to get to the point where I can look at them without hating them. You know, I might have to be able to point. Then I get to the point where I can look at them and kind of like them.
Yeah.
You know, but the reconciliation, I think it comes down the road. But I think that should be the aim, and that should be the goal, if at all possible.
Yeah, I'm sure in your role as a counselor, therapist, stuff like that, you've had to talk to people about boundaries.
Yeah.
Because they're a loving thing to do sometimes is boundaries. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
part of it.
So if you're in a situation where the person has abused you, right? So you're never going to forget it. You may get to the point, God willing, you'll get to the point where it doesn't dominate your life anymore. But it doesn't mean that that person needs to be part of your life anymore. I can forgive them at a distance. You know, I can forgive them. We got a barrier here. I can forgive you, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to let you're not going to have the same access to my life that you once had, but that doesn't mean that I haven't forgiven you. I have forgiven you. It's no longer dominating our relationship, nor is it dominating my life, but there still has to be some boundaries.
Yeah, and that you just don't wish them evil anymore.
Right,
Sometimes
right.
that's the first step is I no longer wish that person harm.
Right, exactly
Even
right.
if I don't inflict
That's
it,
good.
you know,
That's
it's a good
exactly
step.
right. Thank you for that.
And then the last question, or the last thing I wrote down, I could have written down a million things, but you said love should be loud. So how do we love loudly? For someone who's an introvert,
Yeah.
is like, what? I don't want to do anything loud. So how do we love loudly?
Well, I think you start loving loudly by beginning to pray for people. Okay? You know, maybe the loudest thing you can do is to pray for someone else, or to pray for someone that, you know, you just, they rub you the wrong way. They've offended you. That might be an example of loving loud. But it's the action that, it might be an action that makes you the most uncomfortable in the loving. You can be an introvert and love loud. Doesn't mean it has to be, you know, vocal, but it's just, it guides what you do. It's noticeable, even if you're the only one at the present time who notices it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's so good. You know, you were talking about people who offend you, people who, you know, rub you the wrong way. And I remember hearing a sermon one time about if you're someone who does get offended a lot, you may have a pride issue. Like
Yes.
maybe this is no longer a them problem. This becomes
right.
a you problem.
That's exactly right.
You know, that you have an issue with pride. So much of it goes
Yeah.
down to humility.
It does.
Right?
It does. You know, to take the Corinthians from where they are, it comes to that. It has to. They have to face their own pride. Thus, he says, love is not arrogant. It's not rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not about you. Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to the humility of the person.
That's right, man. It's hard.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
That was so
All right.
good.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, you can use the QR code on the screen. But yeah, that's some great stuff, Mom.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you, Kelvin. And if you want to rewatch the sermon or watch it for the first time, you can find it at boulevard.to/sermons.
Sorry, that wraps up this week's Big Three. Look for this podcast on your favorite platforms, and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big Three again.
But until then, don't be afraid to ask questions. He's a big God, and he's got big answers.